On April 5th, 1909, the Arizona Gazette published a story titled Explorations in Grand Canyon, claiming that an explorer named G.E. Kincaid discovered a massive underground cavern system near Marble Canyon, Arizona. The article alleged he traveled down the Colorado River in a wooden skiff. He noticed stains on a canyon wall around 1,400 to 2,000 feet above the riverbed, scaled it with ropes and film equipment, then entered a huge underground complex reportedly occupied by a civilization possibly from Egypt. Inside, he found a main chamber shaped like a cross, nearly 500 feet long, copper weapons and unknown alloys, hieroglyphs and idol statues resembling Osiris or Buddha, sarcophagi and over 100 mummified bodies, all small framed and wrapped in dark linen. Separate chambers believed to be kitchens, burial rooms, granaries, and workshops. It was suggested that the cave complex could have housed up to 50,000 people total. The article claimed Smithsonian archaeologists under Professor S.A. Jordan were conducting excavations and had sealed off the site under military-style restriction for moving artifacts to Washington, D.C. Currently, the Smithsonian denies all involvement and no official records exist of G.E. Kincaid or the find. So, if the Smithsonian and even more local groups such as the Grand Canyon Historical Society have claimed the original article as a hoax and have denied ever having records of such an event or people, then why does the Kincaid legend live on? Let's dive into it. In the late 1800s, U.S. geologist and explorer Clarence Edward Doughton, working with the U.S. Geological Survey, began naming prominent Grand Canyon formations. Instead of simple numeric or English names, he chose deities from global mythology, believing the canyon's grandeur demanded a mythic scale. These included the Isis Temple, Cheops Pyramid, Osiris Temple, and the Temple of Ra, which were all named after Egyptian mythology. Although on record, Clarence noted he named this due to the formations being in, quote, temples of nature. But today, it is believed that the areas are named as such in resemblance to Kincaid's find. And perhaps, back in the late 1800s to early 1900s, the legend really may have been true. Not only do the naming conventions match the finds, another weird part of the Grand Canyon are its forbidden zones. Despite it being inside a national park, many of the formations mentioned are legally or functionally off limits to the public. Such designations, such as those areas never receiving maintained trails, the closed-off areas that are very vertical and hard to get to without more advanced gear anyway, super remote locations that can't be reached anyway, no helicopter landing zones due in part to preservation laws, and overnight camping being not allowed at many of these sites, led many to believe such ruling over areas had to lead to something being hidden there. Perhaps they are closed off due to how dangerous the climbs can be, or perhaps they are restricted as such for other reasons, such as what the legend points to. It doesn't stop there though. Even with the matching names and all the restrictions, there are dozens of first-hand and second-hand accounts where hikers attempting to approach the areas anyway are intercepted by those in unmarked uniforms, sometimes armed, who order them to leave the area. Pretty akin to Area 51. Some witnesses even claim to have been followed all the way back to the trailheads where they came from. Several private pilots have been warned by air traffic control to not enter specific flight paths over the Grand Canyon. Even some accounts of helicopter instruments going black or malfunctioning over places such as the Cheops Pyramid or Raw Tower formations have happened. Second-hand accounts or not, no fly zones do in fact exist over the Grand Canyon and touching such areas. The National Park Service, the NPS, denies any unusual restrictions beyond routine environmental protections. But, to fuel more speculation, they never offered explanations for why certain ancient named sites are surrounded by no-hike buffer zones, or why no archaeological digs have ever been documented in those specific areas, despite there being several other areas that have been archaeologically dug up. The lack of transparency is still fueling more ideas, perhaps keeping the legend alive. Now the final part that stokes a lot of the hidden agenda ideas, the missing person cases. In case 1, around 1990, an amateur team tried to rediscover Kincaid's Cave. They left camp at a trailhead near Marble Canyon, and they never returned. Their gear was left untouched. No bodies were ever found, no distress calls ever received. Now in case 2, around 2002, a private pilot aiming to photograph Shiva Temple crashed in fair weather. NTSB blamed a sudden wind shear, but the pilot was military trained, so it was implied they would have been okay. Rumors swirled he might have seen something unusual and was silenced. I do have to add a heads up though. When trying to find official documentation covering the 2 cases, I only found fringe blog posts and nothing too substantial. Perhaps a cover-up, or more realistically, just people adding to the legend. But what do you guys think? Do the oddly named formations hold any secrets? Do these restricted areas guard hidden ancient history? Given the lack of official documentation, I wouldn't think so, but the legend is interesting. But does it hold true? Let's take a cryptid clue.